I'm just sort of thinking about one of the paradoxes of human intelligence in that so many of the things that we master become non-conscious in order to be mastered. And here, just I think maybe the example I was giving in the chat earlier is language fluency. So when you have a kind of conscious use of a language as you're learning it, you're pretty bad at that language. And you're only really fluent once you don't have to think about it. And there are so many other examples, right? And I guess I was just thinking a lot about the paradox of consciousness with that paradox of intelligence, where consciousness really has to block so many things out. A lot of people have been talking about that in the chat, actually. And I was even thinking about this with something Gillian Hadfield said earlier in the chat about building a model of what other people think we're going to do. I hope she's going to say something about that. But I was just thinking about that non-conscious sort of side to intelligence. I wonder if you had something to comment on with that.
I do have something to comment on that. It's, I would use a slightly different term. I wouldn't say our consciousness blocks something. You can think of it a little bit differently. Imagine you've got all these sensory inputs coming on. You got several million sensory axons from your eyes, ears, and your skin coming in, and they're changing all the time. And when you build models of the inputs, then you've in some sense abstracted away the details. You can say, oh, yes, I see something. I say, oh, that looks like a bicycle. When I first see a bicycle, I don't know what it is. I have to look at all the parts and see, oh, it's got this and it's got this, and maybe this does this. But after a while, I learn to model this thing. It's not that I've forgotten all the details. It's just that I've abstracted it. Now, what's going on? The brain relies on those abstractions. And so what you and I can talk about, what you and I can say, are only the things that have reached a certain level, if you will. The information gets processed in the cortex in a chain, and only things that at the top are what we're really aware of. But at any point in time, I can go drill down again and say, okay, what was that thing on the bicycle? Or, I could say, yeah, how do I spell that word? Or how do I write this letter? It's all there still. It's not like we're suppressing. It's just naturally, it gets abstracted out by these models. And then the only thing that rises to the top are either things that are wrong or things I attend to specifically. So that's why most of the time we're not, and by the way, when you attend to it, you basically slow down. So, as an athlete, as you probably know, they practice in their mind doing these routines because they don't want to think about it when they're actually in the sport. If you're a skier, you don't want to think about skiing. If you think about skiing, it's slower because you're basically paying attention to all the things that are happening around you, and you're not letting your model take over. So it's more like it's kind of I know a bit of a hand wave here, but you can think about information flowing through a series of regions in the cortex. If I can abstract it out, the brain can abstract it out. It just will, and I'll just pass. I just won't even think about it. It's still happening, but you won't be conscious that you're doing it. And literally the performance gap comes about if you attend to something, it gets slower, even by a few hundred milliseconds. And that can be devastating for an athlete or a musician or, an orator.